In 1968, doctors determined Gein was mentally able to confer with counsel and participate in his defense. The trial began on 7 November 1968 and lasted 1 week. A psychiatrist testified that Ed Gein had told him that he did not know whether the killing of Bernice Worden was intentional or accidental. Ed Gein had told him that while he was examining a firearm in the Worden store, that the weapon had discharged and killed Worden. He said that he had not intended to aim the rifle at Worden, and he did not remember anything else that happened that morning. Ed was convicted of murder of Bernice Worden, but just of Bernice Worden. Gein's trial was held without jury, with Judge Robert H. Gulmar presiding. Gein was found guilty on 14 November. A second trial dealt with Gein's sanity after testimony by doctors for the prosecution and defense. The judge ruled Gein not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him committed. Gein would spend the rest of his life in a mental hospital. The judge wrote, quote, due to prohibitive cost, Gein was tried for only one murder, that of Ms. Worden. However, Ed did admit to killing Mary Hogan. Ed was found to be insane. He would never get out of custody. He would spend the rest of his life in the Mendota State Mental Hospital and never get out either way. But that raises a chilling question. How many people did Ed Gein really kill? Until his death in 1984 at the age of 77, he only admitted to murdering Worden and Hogan. Ed Gein died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute due to respiratory failure, secondary to lung cancer, on 26 July 1984. Over the years, souvenir seekers chipped pieces from his gravestone at the Plainfield Cemetery until the stone itself was stolen in the year 2000. Mary Hogan, 55, a Pine Grove Tavern owner, had vanished without a trace on the night of 8 December, leaving nothing but a bloody trail out of her tavern and a .32 automatic shell case behind. Mary had been missing for 3 years before investigators found what was left of her body at Ed Gein's house. Just a skull and a face in a paper bag. The other bodies, the police found as many as 40 in his home. He claimed he robbed from graves. Gein was also suspected in the disappearance of 2 hunters, his neighbor, and several young girls. There was no real evidence connecting Ed to any one of those disappearances, but he was still suspected. Forensic scientists in the 1950s were incapable of testing the DNA of the remains found at Ed Gein's home, so most of his grotesque craft projects were really never identified. After her discovery, a funeral was held for Bernice a few days later, and she was buried in Plainfield, Wisconsin cemetery. As for the rest of the remains found at Ed's home, quote, the grisly relics were duly photographed in the crime lab and then decently disposed of. As for the rest of the remains, the quote, the grisly relics were duly photographed at the crime lab and then decently disposed of, as written in the book Edward Gein, America's Most Bizarre Murderer. However, what does decently disposed of mean? What happened to every body part found at Ed Gein's house, as well as some of the bones unearthed on the property later? Well, I can tell you, They were all buried at an undisclosed location in 1962. That location has remained a mystery to the general public for 5 decades. I'll tell you, though, where it is. It's in the Plainfield Cemetery, where a small, flat gravestone engraved with the words, "In memory of the unknown dead." It's difficult to find, and it's often covered, because there's fear that once that this gets out, that it will also be stolen, just like Ed Gein's headstone had been stolen. Just look for the flagpole. We may never know how many people actually fell victim to the butcher of Plainfield. It is certain that Ed Gein will stand as one of history's most disturbing killers. Gein is buried in Plainfield Cemetery, Wisconsin. His grave is without a marker. He rests beside his mother Augusta, his brother Henry, and his father George. He is laid to rest with the rest of his family, surrounded by the graves that he had once violated. His final victim, Bernice Warden, is also buried there, not more than a few feet from him. Gein's grave is unmarked today. His gravestone had suffered some vandalism over the years, nothing too serious. In 2000, it was stolen by a rock band, and it was eventually recovered in Seattle. It was in the possession of the promoter of the band, Angry White Males. They were selling stone rubbings for $50 each on eBay. The promoter claimed that his headstone was a reproduction, but it was covered with the same satanic symbols and obscenities of the missing stone. It also had the same chips taken out of it by years of Ed Gein's fans coming to visit and taking some souvenirs. Interest in Ed Gein had never, ever waned, frustrating Plainfield's residents who want the town to be associated with a more pleasant subject. The town has even formed a committee, Positive Plainfield, to do just that. Fearing it would be stolen again and again and again, Ed's tombstone was never returned to the cemetery. It's in possession of the county sheriff's department. It's in the historical museum, which houses some of Ed's property. It was briefly considered that it would be put up on display, but they've decided against it. Visitors leave behind makeshift grave markers, and there's usually a hole from which some sick people have dug out souvenir grave dirt. After Ed's arrest, his car, a 1949 maroon Ford sedan, was sold at auction. The winning bid was $760, and it went to a carnival sideshow operator from Rockford, Illinois, named Bunny Gibson. Gibson knew that there was money to be made on the macabre curiosity. He put mannequins in the car to represent Ed Gein and Ms. Warden, and exhibited it at county fairs around the state that summer as Ed Gein's Ghoul Car. Anyone could get a look at the car that, quote, hauled the dead from their graves for 25 cents. It made its first appearance at the county fair in Seymour, Wisconsin in July of 1958. Over the course of 3 days, some 2,000 visitors parted with their quarters for a glimpse inside the tent. The exhibit caused considerable controversy, as many were unhappy with Gibson's exploitation of such a shocking and deranged crime. The group Mental Health America Wisconsin petitioned for it to be ended. His final recorded appearance at the Washington County Fair in Stinger, Wisconsin, where the local sheriff shut it down. There would be no more exhibits. The ghoul car made its final recorded appearance at the Washington County Fair in Stinger, Wisconsin, where the local sheriff shut down the exhibition. It was banned by the state entirely, and Gibson returned to his home in Illinois defeated. He and the car faded into obscurity. Their fates unknown. Whatever became Ed Gein's old sedan? Several unique items believed to have been owned by Ed Gein were put up for sale in 2015. These objects, a pair of skis, knives, a shovel, and a rather unremarkable cauldron, had been purchased at the March 1958 estate sale of Gein's belongings. The skis, knife, shovel, and rifles can be found at the county museum. One item, a cauldron, was being sold by Dan McIntyre, who claimed his grandmother bought it from the estate sale in order to plant flowers in it. The family friend, Hollis Brown, saw the cauldron. He told them that he had seen it at the Gein's farm when he was helping authorities remove evidence from the house. According to Brown, that cauldron had contained human entrails when he last saw it. Ghost Adventurers star Zach Baggins is in possession of it now. If you want to see it, and we have, you will have to travel to Zach's Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada. The cauldron is there. It's on display as Ed's Cursed Cauldron, and has been the inspiration for movies that have terrified generations. But they aren't quite as chilling as the real-life story. Evil does walk among us. We hope that you enjoyed this video. Keep your doors locked and the lights on.